morning, good afternoon. It's noon now. Good afternoon, everyone listening to us live from home. You are welcome to our show, Domestic Abuse Seek Help, which is titled Behind the Screens. Behind the Screens, Domestic Abuse Seek Help. So, if there's anyone connecting with us on this platform with your devices or on your digital platforms or on your phones or whatsoever, even on the radio itself, you are welcome. Thank you for joining us today. So, we again will be looking at domestic abuse, which is a regular show from a different perspective this morning. And we want to look at the role that conflict resolution plays when we talk of domestic violence or domestic abuse, how relevant it is, where especially in a situation where trust is already broken. And we'll be talking of conflict resolution as a tool, either before or after. Again, today I have with me Miss Rachel Dada, who is my regular guest on this platform week after
Hello,
week.
hello.
Yes.
Good
Can
afternoon,
you say to
everyone.
yes.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, ma'am. You're
It's
welcome
good
to
to
the show.
it's good to be with you again. Good
Yes.
afternoon to our regular listeners and as many as will be joining us for the first time on
Yes.
this interesting show. Thank you.
On this interesting weekly show, Domestic Abuse Seek Help. Domestic abuse will normally briefly define and introduce and explain whatever it fits into. For those who are joining us for the first time, even for those who haven't joined us for a while. So, what's domestic abuse all about?
Yes, thank you very much, sir. For the benefit of those who will be joining us for the first time, and also even if you have been with us on a regular basis, in order to put into perspective the topic that we shall be discussing today, because when we say conflict resolution, this connotes that there must have been some element of conflict or disagreements, for us to begin to explore resolution. So, what is domestic abuse? Domestic abuse or domestic violence, these two terms, often used interchangeably, is a pattern of behaviors which involves coercive, threatening, degrading behaviors, usually perpetrated from adults as early as from age 16 towards partners who are in intimate partner relationships. And this involves psychological, emotional, sexual, digital, online behaviors as well. Financial abuse. Usually, a large amount of statistics involves women being victims of domestic abuse. But likewise, there is a lot of statistics to support and confirm that men can also be victims of domestic abuse. Thank you very much.
Thank you. A sizable number of men also, usually 3% or 4, could be victims of domestic abuse. So it's not just about ladies all by themselves. And when we talk of domestic abuse, inevitably there must have been conflict of interest. There must have been disagreement in one way or the other. So is there a way we can manage this conflict to avoid the incidence of domestic abuse or domestic violence in the first instance? Could it be a tool to prevent domestic abuse? Talking of conflict resolution.
Yes. Um, when and how cases involving domestic abuse can be mediated It differs in the sense that mediation may not be appropriate in all intimate partner violence or situations. In some cases, because you see, when we are talking of domestic abuse which culminates into violence after a long period of time, some may be at the stage, the early stage, when the violence is just evolving. You understand? Some might have turned into crisis that, in fact, query if mediation would be appropriate, like I said. So when we say mediation, it depends on the level of violence that we are looking at, and also the decision to participate is one that should depend on each party, both the identified perpetrator and the victims. Yes,
Yes, yes,
and
yes,
yes, again, it also involves whether any of the parties sees themselves as benefiting from such mediation. Thank you. And when we're talking of mediation, it is more about allowing parties, when I say parties, I mean the survivors or victims, the perpetrators or alleged perpetrators, these parties to make their own informed choices about whether they want to participate in mediation. Because what we have to understand is that usually it appears you already have two warring parties against each other.
yeah,
Yes, things have gone on, victims have been identified. That is, again, we have to consider whether children have been involved. You
yes.
understand? So the approach is such that the mediator has to explain the mediation process to
Okay.
the in the in intimate partner, yeah,
So
survivor.
that we
Yes.
can, so that we can clarify matters, is it
Hmm.
possible for conflicts to be resolved between two warring partners all by themselves without involving a mediator? And it's still a form of conflict resolution where, just like you said now, warring partners or partners that feels they are the ones that are on the receiving end and the one that refuses to acknowledge or even deliberately acknowledges that he is the abuser or she is the abuser, makes the choice. That's the key word that you have used. Because that's the turnaround, that's the fulcrum where things change. If one party or the two parties make the choice to resolve their differences, of course, not without a compromise or compromises here and there. But the first thing is choice making. And this is vital because we still see the so called abuser and the abused, even after being separated, coming back together to still have intimate relationships that while separated, they still have issues. I'm talking of talking of pregnancy now in the
Yes.
process of med. So in that wise, whatever brought these two together, could it also make them to be willing to resolve their differences without any third party mediation? Because still a form of conflict resolution.
It may. Thank you very much, sir. It may not be very easy and straightforward
Okay.
to for parties to resolve issues amongst themselves, because usually there's a saying that once the issue that has been domestic, once it comes to common knowledge of anyone or people outside the family, it is no longer domestic. So it is, if any resolution can be facilitated by the parties, this you expect this to happen before the matter is reported, before the mediator is involved at all. Once the
That's,
mediator,
that's, that's exactly what I'm saying.
mm,
If they choose, abuses go on sometimes for decades
oh yeah, sure.
in between the two parties,
Mm-hmm.
and no third party is actually aware or involved, talk less of mediation.
Mm.
What if these two individuals in this intimate relationship choose to resolve their differences, either by way of let's sit down and set boundaries, let's decide between ourselves how much we can compromise matters between ourselves so that we can manage ourselves. There is also this element of self pride that could make these parties not wanting a third party, which makes this issue of abuse to drag on for years. So there's still a level of self dignity and self, yeah,
There is the ego. Every individual
ego,
has an
wanting
ego.
to protect that ego. So not wanting a third party to be involved. So boundaries could be set. There could be compromises reached. One party could be accommodating to the other just to contain themselves in that relationship, contain excesses of one another in that relationship. Is this a possibility? Does it happen?
Hmm. Sometimes it may be possible. Like I said, it depends on the level of the violence we're talking about. Because we have to realize that usually, and this often happens, there would have been a lot of informal ways to resolve conflicts amongst partners, like maybe family members becoming involved, maybe their networks, their friends,
The network of social friends, social
maybe
networks,
when you are talking of faith communities, they might have
fake leaders,
invited maybe their faith leaders, but their faith leaders might be aware of what is going on in that family and try to sit the two of them down, talk through, or try to mediate, well, some form of there would have been a lot of behind the scenes mediation, informal form of mediation that had gone on. Yes. And
yes.
okay, let's look up about at it, from the perspective of faith. You understand? All this would have gone on. So by the time the formal mediators, sponsored by the state, now get involved, you would know that then we're talking of a point, at getting to a point whereby it appears nothing else has worked.
Hmm, hmm, interesting. Okay. So there's a possibility, basically. It is a possible, uh,
Yes.
because the
Yes.
reason why I am looking at this is that some of the things that spirals out of control, there could be the possibility of nipping them in the bud, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
You can nip it in the bud.
Oh yeah, it's possible. It's
Yes.
possible, but it's very rare. It's very rare. Yeah, it's possible to resolve it, get things running again, but it stands the test of time.
It is
You know,
subject
it's
to the test of
Yeah, it
time.
stands the test of time because we're hopefully um, the relationship will now start going on very well. Well, hopefully there won't be any, problems again. If not,
Because each party knows his
yes.
or her boundaries now.
And if something now happens, what we must all we all aware is that there has been some background issues, because whatever, however it started, can never be ruled out.
And oftentimes the background issues keeps evolving.
Quickly
Oftentimes,
quickly comes to the fore again.
before again. Hmm. And this increases the risk when you talk of risk analysis, isn't it?
Mm, mm,
It brings about the high propensity of something more violent, something more worse off,
mm-hmm.
cropping up from some other side.
Mm-hmm.
Little things to trigger what has been covered up in the surface before,
Oh
making
yes.
things escalate out of
Oh yes.
proportion.
Because at this stage, it will be more of each party tolerating, accommodating, just let's see how it's gonna work. Let's see how far we can go, on this string. Well,
So
for the
there is no
sake
longer
that
a natural relationship.
that's when you hear, I'm doing everything for the sake of the children. You understand? Oh, it's because of the children. And sincerely, sir, when you watch the space in situations like this, by the time it appears the children, maybe they start going off to uni, they're adult, young adults now, they can look after themselves, they they're not at home, as they used to be.
So it's just left with the two parties in the intimate relationship, intimate in quote,
Yes.
just the
Eh,
two parties now.
yes, yes.
It
Then
becomes
there's
obvious
a
and
higher
evident.
likelihood, of, you know, um, how will I put it?
A research
Then there'll be a higher likelihood of, the relationship
breaking down again.
keeping again.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The reason why this is coming to the table today is because we begin to discover that um, there are relationships breaking down now that runs into decades, and people wonder what goes on, and it does not leave out the high and the mighty in the society. In fact, that is what makes people to it baffles the members of the public that could there have been abuse in this relationship over the years that is being tolerated as we are discussing now?
Hmm.
Could there have been issues that have been swept under the ground? And at this point in time, these two individuals that are in their 60s, in their 70s, have now chosen to part ways, and possibly they are celebrities and well known. And then you begin to again trace it back to many, many years of that relationship, earlier years in that relationship. That
Yes.
actually there is possibility of abuse in the past.
Yes.
So at that point in time and at this stage, or evidently a third party probably needs to be called in. Again, if the two parties choose to have the matter resolved. Do you see any success, any future in such a relationship any further?
Yeah. Like I said again, it's always, it's good to give it a try. You can't rule out, the possibility of success, in a mediation. You give it a trial, but that is if both parties agree to it from the beginning. Yes. And the approach, again, I mean, the particular approach that, some of the approaches, that mediators employ, it focuses it has to focus more on the information that flows from the mediator to the intimate partner violence survivor. You understand about the process. It's like, explaining the process to them. And this process that we're talking about, it consists of, is that it's like it's to ensure the safety and well-being of everyone, all the members, both the perpetrator, the survivor, the victims, and all the family members. It is about, to screen. When you say to screen, to look at what has happened briefly, in a summary, assess, the situation, to focus on the path of resolution, which, and how the relationship will now respond to this. So
mm,
this approach, it explores how intimate partner violence might affect the ability and willingness of parties to participate in mediation, and how their concerns could be addressed, and whether the process, or whether there should be another process other than mediation. One thing I would like you to know that when mediation fails, usually the next option is to go to court,
mm,
especially where you have children involved.
mm. But,
So,
but again, I want to believe that there are some relationships that are so secretive that they are not necessarily violent. They are not necessarily, but there is this emotional abuse still in that kind of relationship. There's still the taking of one another for granted, and which happens over the years, which one party or the other may not be happy with, and it's just again a matter of tolerance over the years, tolerating one another over the years. You see, this is very common, sadly.
yes, you're right. And another thing is that in some cases, oh, and of course, that is why it's abusive anyway. In some cases, it's like it's only one party. Of course, it's
That
usually
is
one
at the
party,
receiving end.
which is identified as who is identified as the victim that feels, the impact of the abuse. Yes, the other party is like, the other party, obviously, um, manipulates them, degrading behaviors,
If you're
coerce
not
them,
happy, you can walk out of the relationship.
utilize
No
all forms
change.
of, exactly, knowing fully well that this other person that is usually the victim will not be able to
It's
confidently and walk it out.
disadvantaged. It's
Yes.
disadvantaged in one way or the
Yeah,
other.
is obviously at a disadvantage, will not willingly or wish to walk out, especially if children are involved.
Mm,
I don't want to leave my children behind. Oh, and all the other factors, that relate to, oh, I don't want to make it look as if, I'm a failure, my marriage is a
mm,
failure. You
mm,
understand? I'll continue to hold on, as I'll continue to hold on as for as long as possible,
mm.
because nobody wants anybody else to know that they have cracks in their walls. Yes. And well, hopefully that is when, it's like the marking time. Marking time in the sense that, okay, the children are growing. Okay, there'll be a time, when at least, I'll be free. Okay. The children soon they start to exit one by one to uni. They are now adults, they have a mind of their own. Oh, maybe this might be the right time for me. I think I've suffered enough.
Mm. And that's why people get surprised that what's going on? How could people of this that are this old, so number of decades in a relationship,
Yes.
be
Yes.
taking such a decision to part ways?
Even
What?
even another situation is that sometimes even they might hold on to the relationship for as long as maybe the first child gets married, the second child leaves home, maybe gets married too or so, or maybe leave home, start living in them, and when they start having grandchildren, and because usually it will be a very odd period. Nobody will expect at that time.
Time.
At, you expect that the family is well grounded. You understand? Or they've passed through. All the children are grown now. They've had education. They are now living home. Starting their own families. Oh, the family has come to fully now come to stay. Yes. Unfortunately, that is when some of the parties might, maybe one of the parties might say, in fact, I, maybe now is the time that I can
Because of
easily say.
irreconcilable differences, they are not happy.
Exactly. So, and of course we know that all these issues, differences, it did not start yesterday. They
It
have been
dates
there for
back.
years.
Mm,
That's when you know that indeed people have been tolerating each other.
wow.
Mm.
Mm, mm. Okay, so what should we be talking of advising those who find themselves in this? class of intimate partner relationships, and they're experiencing a behind the screen uh, abuse, mental, economical, financial, emotional, or psychological, or whatsoever the category of the abuse may be. What should we be telling them? Because some of them are here listening to us now. They're usually the type that are either pensioners, retirees. They have the time to listen to us on the radio. And it will amaze you, they are there. What's the message?
Sure. Well, the message is, as we've always said, that it is never too early or too late to speak out. And going about the topic that we are discussing today, mediation or conflict resolution, any form of conflict, there can be resolution. You can work towards resolution in any conflict
Any,
situation.
any conflict can be
If
resolved.
and the conflict can resolve if the parties are willing to give it another go. You give it a trial. You give it a trial, you give it a go. Okay? And mediation is available. It
Help is available.
enables, it encourages, parties and practitioners to think to think beyond, the one size fits all. Every individual case is different. No situation is the same. So I mean, it does not dictate whether mediation should occur. It just, or it does not suggest a formula for structuring mediation. It helps each party to make a
An informed
voluntary
choice.
and, informed decision about participation. Yes, and it fosters dialogue. That is the most important thing. It
Mm.
fosters dialogue between the mediator and each of the parties, because it is a process that every party must be approached and interviewed individually to
Mm.
explain the process to them, so that they, to be able to say, okay, whether they are willing, yes, to
So,
participate or not.
okay, so while we are here, before we go, what kind of advice will you be giving community leaders, faith community leaders, family heads, clan heads,
Mm, mm.
in terms of how they can be of help to people who find themselves in this situation, either as victims?
Yes, in terms of how faith leaders, family leaders, friends, whatever situation you find yourself, the first thing is that we must, every situation, no matter how bad it may appear, it can still be redeemed. It can be salvaged. You understand? It can be
So
salvaged.
it's hope.
We have to be, as faith leaders, especially, faith leaders in the communities. We must be willing and ready to offer mediation in every conflict situation. It's between intimate partners, or marriages, or spouses. We must be ready to we offer mediation as an option, and
So
be ready to work with them,
we should be and
through,
hopeful.
yes, to achieve a positive outcome. So, and that is it. You see, everybody is a party to this, because when we, I mean, it's better. It's usually, much more advisable to utilize conflict resolution rather than saying, okay, let's go to court and sort it out. Because by the time we get to court, everything will have to be, you know, there will be
It
no
is,
going back,
it is more
including the
expensive,
children.
it is more time consuming, it is more expensive, it is usually by the work by the books rather than, that's the court system. They work by the legal systems rather than empathize and be willing that everything will
Mm,
end.
mm,
So they tick work by tick boxes, so to say.
mm, mm.
I'm even asking that what kind of predisposition should these mediators have in terms of listening, empathizing, you know, knowing what to say, knowing how to handle matters, and What should be their disposition?
Yeah, what they have to be neutral. They have to be neutral. They have to explain, what they stand for. They have to evidence that they uphold the principle of confidentiality to the letters. Yes, they have to. Like I said, neutrality means we're not here to judge anyone. We're not here to accord, blame to anyone. We're just here to. Is a forum whereby we just throw everything on the table. Yes, we throw everything on the table and we start to talk about it. So nobody is blaming anyone, and it has to be confidential. And like I said, the beginning of it is that they must have private conversations with the parties to establish, their willingness to participate.
Okay. Ultimately, these two parties will be left to themselves to go and have a word. When is it safe to do so? When will it be safe to say, okay, parties can probably meet in a neutral place without us expecting anything negative, outbursts, violence, and then
Mm.
two parties can talk in a matured manner. At what
Mm.
stage do you think this could happen?
Mm. Well, it's like when it's like the process of therapy. At what point would a therapist identify that, okay, the person they're supporting is now ready to disengage from therapy, from the relationship? You understand? You have to test it, you have to try it, and at the end of the day, you have to allow the parties to own that process, because it is about them.
Absolutely. At the end of
It
the
is
day, they
it
are
is
the ones
about
put
them. Even
together.
whoever the mediator may be, it is not the problem of them, it is about them. So they have to own it, they have to take it on. That is why from the beginning they have to be willing to participate. Because it's like, if you're not willing to make this work, why make a start anyway?
Hmm. Why start it if you don't have the trust that it will work? And
Mm.
this is where we're going to be rounding off for today. On a final note, just one or two pieces of advice, please.
Yeah. Well, like we always say, it's not it's not a new thing, that problems happens in relationships. We have incidents of abuse, patterns of abuse, or that results in violence. Every family, every situation, every relationship has its own problem. Again and again, we're not know we're not sure how it all started, but, well, it's here now, and it's happening now, and we have to deal with it. We have to face on to it, and we have to make ourselves available to make it work
Never,
before it gets,
never
yeah,
deny it.
it gets to a point whereby, we just have to we have to divide it as it is.
Everybody has to part ways when
Hmm.
it becomes really, really critical. Ever so grateful for your time, ma'am.
Thank
Uh,
you, sir.
as we reach the end of today's edition of Behind the Screens Domestic Abuse, Seek Help. We come again your way the next week by the grace of God, God sparing our lives, probably with another topic that will be of interest to you, our listeners. Thank you for staying with us. We very much appreciate you coming with us every week. Please do enjoy the rest of your day and have a great weekend. Thank you.